Hey there, perfect peeps. Today we're going to do something a little fun. If you've joined up on a Discord server, you might be hanging out in there a lot more, and you are probably interested in getting a lot of your build statuses or other triggers coming in automatically. So you don't have to jump around and you can see notifications very easily. So with that said, what we're going to do today is load up a static website to Google Cloud Platform. And when we do that, we're going to run a build, and that build command is going to go trigger a pub sub message, and that subscription then is going to trigger a Firebase Firestore trigger that's going to then take and post that message to a webhook in Discord. All of that is just a fancy way of saying a build's going to run, and then we're going to see a message in Discord. It's going to be pretty awesome. Okay, folks, so I'm going to cd into my web folder, which is where I do all of my presentations. Wherever you're going to do yours, I would suggest doing the same. So after that, we're going to run the command npx create React app. This could be a Gatsby command, a Next.js command, Angular, Vue, whatever you want. I just figured why not pick something popular. So we'll call this thing GCP build Discord. Sure. All right, we'll let that thing run. And just FYI, while it's running, npx is a command that exists within npm. So if you don't have npm and you'd like to run this, you can install that by heading out to Node.js, and it comes pre-bundled with that installer. So when I jump into VS Code, what I'm gonna look to do is a few different things. So let's make sure everyone can see this first of all. So this is kind of the basic setup for a Create React app. It's going to have an index.js where it's linking to that root, and then it'll produce an index.html out of that. So just to run quickly through, let's pop open a new terminal. And what you'll see here when I do this is a new folder that gets created. So you'll see right now we have this index.html, and when we run this through the build pipeline, we're going to run the command npm run build. Now this could take a little bit to run once it's up and going. So you'll end up seeing here, we have this build static. So you see this new build folder. Essentially, this is what we're going to want to load to a site. And it's got a new HTML, index.html that is produced along with some other assets that are coming out with it. So that's what our cloud builder is going to do for us. So typically what you can do is go through Google Cloud and start running the command line operations. But instead of doing that, what we're going to do is walk through visually, because I feel like it helps when you're first starting out to set up Google Cloud Build. So the first thing that you want to do is create a new cloudbuild.yaml folder. Cloud Build will take and pick this up and run different commands within it. So let's go ahead and open a new folder and call that cloudbuild.yaml. So inside of this folder, you can put comments like this, and we're just going to say simple React build. And one of the first steps that we're going to run is one named node, and we could pick any version. We'll just go with one that I know is floating around. And then we have to give it an entry point. So this name is actually of a cloud build or image that exists out in cloud build. So let me bring up the documentation really quick so you can find out where that exists. So if you're to take a look, there's different cloud builders that are available. The one that we're going to use is NPM. So there's all kinds of different items out here that you can check out and walk through. Here is a full list of them. I have been using a lot of the community-driven ones as well, especially when I was using Hugo. So let's take a look here. And here is the full list. So we're going to use this NPM one. And here's kind of that default steps list. So you could actually even copy and paste this, but I'll put it in the lesson plan as well. So I am going to cheat a little bit and go a little quicker and paste that in. So at this point, we have npm install, and that's going to get all of our dependencies from our package.json. So let's bump this down. It's really just these items, and what we're looking for is this build step, which is going to be creating our build folder. So the next step in our cloud build.yaml is going to be a step that we'll also use for building building our React app. So same thing, we have a name, we have our entry point, and instead of install, we're actually going to run the command run, and then based on what we want to run, it's just like on our CLI when we run any of our script commands, we're going to run build. Oops, there we go. And so with these two commands, we'll skip the deployment at this point. If this is, I'll do that afterwards, but essentially what we're looking for here is set up just to run the build and complete it, and then we'll kick it over to Discord. So that is our full build setup. Now let's get this up into Google Cloud Builder. This should present you with a nice little detail screen. If you get nothing, it's your first time in, you're gonna get a new project right away to walk through. So what you can do here is click the new project button, and at that point, that will bring you into this screen. So once we're in the screen, we can call this GCP build Discord. Oops. That is not the name. GCP build Discord webhook. So let's go with that. We're gonna leave it in my organization. If you don't have an organization, that's fine. You can just have no organization built into it. I like to have mine because all of my billing's set up. You don't need to set up an organization like that to continue. So let's go ahead and create our new project. So now that we have our new project out here, what we can do is go directly into our build folder. Now you might not have yours up here pinned like this if you're brand new to it. It's going to be down here in tools in cloud build. The other way that you can do this is by searching. Now, if you haven't done that before, what you can do is go out to GitHub and we'll make a new example project. So here we'll do the same name, GCP build Discord webhook, triggering Discord message from GCP build. All right, I'll leave that as public now that GitHub provides unlimited people in your private repos. That's a great option as well. So you don't have to have this Google Cloud build hooked up, but it will walk you through that if you need to. So once I create this repository, I'll get a command for my Git upstream. So let's check out if I have one set already. So if you do git remote, so there's nothing set right now. So I should be able at this point to just fire this off. So it's adding the origin for my GitHub and it's pushing. So now if I check this out, refresh, I should see that my new folder is up there with my sample React app. So now that this is complete, we actually have this cloud build.yaml that we can trigger. But before we do that, let's jump back to cloud build. So in cloud build, you can hook up your GitHub repo. It'll ask you to log in if you haven't before. And once you do, you can you can select the repository that we just created. You'll have to check that the GitHub content is transferred, blah, blah, blah. So we connect up, and now we're all set. So we're gonna create a push trigger. So this default push trigger for now, to keep it simple, if I go into the edit mode, essentially this will run anytime a push to a branch, and in this case, any branch. Typically, you're gonna wanna set up your normal Git flow and either trigger off a development or a production branch. So it actually is already set to this auto detect cloud build.yaml or Docker file. We're using the cloud build file for now. So now that this is all saved and ready to go, we can look at our back over here in VS Code. So the only update that I have made, and you can see this by the indicator over here, is this cloud build.yaml. That is not up in GitHub yet. So I'm gonna just call this command or add a message here, and you can do this on the command line, but it might be easier again for people that are just getting started with development. In cloud build, in this message, we're gonna do a git commit. So we're gonna say new cloud build. And you can push that either by clicking the arrow down here, or more specifically, you can push right from here. So either way works. So once that's pushed, it's going to go up to GitHub, and then Google Cloud Builder will see that, and you'll see the indicator has started running now because it found a successful one. Now what we can do is dive into this and see what it's actually doing. So in the first step, it's going out and grabbing a new image based on node, and it's going to build that image, which takes a little time. But the cool thing about pulling a node image like this is you don't have to store one and therefore pay for an image to be in your project. It's just going to be available each time, and it'll download it accordingly. So typically node is pretty quick, and if we have follow-on commands like the next one, it will recognize the fact it's already fetched it and it will use it. So now it's finished pulling in our image, and the next time for our run build, you'll see that it already has our node image. It can state it right there. So it doesn't have to, for each step, it doesn't have to go pull a new image if it recognizes that you already have one. So at this point, what you see here is that it built out our files correctly. So it would have triggered our build. So the next part of this is to set up a pub sub message that we are going to subscribe to. So again, you can either search pub sub, or you can go over here, and pub sub is down the list a little ways. So it's under big data pub sub topics. Now that we have our cloud build set up to trigger off our GitHub pushes, what we can do is create a pub sub topic. So make sure you're in a pub sub folder. Again, if you need to search for it, you can go pub sub and it'll drop you right in here. So the topic that we're going to create, it has to have a specific name to it, which is something I forgot as I was initially recording this video. So once your topic has been created, you should see something like this with a result in it. And what we're going to set up now is our cloud function to trigger upon that topic. Make sure you're in the directory of your project, so you can do Firebase init. And the only thing we want right now are functions. So hitting spacebar will select that function or unselect it. We're going to add Firebase to a current Google Cloud Platform project because we already created it. So here's our GCP build Discord webhook. You should see something similar to that. You can move up and down with your arrow keys and select it. Okay, so we're actually going to use TypeScript for this example. Now that we have the Firebase installed with functions, we can take a look at our project. So the structure now has Firebase in the root of it. You'll see an RC function that's just telling it what project at this point. The other item that it installed was firebase.json, and the command here, what it's going to do is go into your functions and actually do a lint and a build. So you can check out functions, and it actually has its own package. So it has run lint, run build. Here's lint and here's build. So it's just using that TypeScript command and linting prior to it. So if we check out our folder structure currently, let's get rid of some of this stuff. Oops. Shrink this down a smidge. So what we have here is just a base hello world type of function out here that it's exporting. And so if you were to uncomment this, you could actually go out and check out this hello world. So we'll take and leave that one in there just so you can kind of see how that works. The next item we're going to do is create our build pub sub topic. And so if you remember, we created a pub sub topic out here called GCP build Discord. So I like to separate out each kind of function in its own folder. And what we're going to do is create a new one called Discord build hook, or maybe hooks. And within there, Discord build hook .ts, since we're using TypeScript. So because in our index.ts, we're actually already pulling in Firebase functions, we don't need that part in our Discord build hooks, but it's typically good to reference these sort of items within your TypeScript folder so that you get that nice TypeScripty autocomplete and things like that. So at this point, what we're going to do is set up a new one, a new function, and we're going to do export const, how about GCP build trigger Discord. And then we need to tell functions to set up a pub sub listener. So you'll notice the difference between this function's HTTPS that's actually looking for a webhook call coming in on request. We're actually looking for a pub sub message coming in, or a topic coming in. So the topic, again, what that's going to refer to is the topic over here we created. So in GCP, we'll jump out and place that in, and then we'll say on publish, we are going to grab a pub sub event. And if I take a look and peek here, you'll see this event context. Okay, so at that point, let's arrow and set up our function. Oops, that is why. There we go. Let's shrink this down a smidge, or just close it all together so we get a little more room. So you'll see this full message, and what we're doing here is taking this function topic on publish, and we're returning that back to Cloud Function so it can run this full Cloud Function for us. So the first thing that we can do is take and just look at the data that's coming through. So if we do const build and then equals, you know what, let's set up a helper. This might be easier. Okay. So the data that's actually coming in is base 64. So what we're going to have to do here is do json.parse. And you're going to need to use the buffering system because it's data, and then base 64 and toString. Okay, so that data that's coming in, oops. So the data is actually from the pub sub event. This is why I like TypeScript. I probably would have broken something at that point. So now we should have everything that's in our build data. And we can just take and console log that for now and take a peek at what our build is. I usually like to do like json.stringify so it's all in one section, and then put whatever object you want to console log out there. And then you can just return back, or it's going to complete by itself at this point. So let's start there. We have to take and export this back into our index.ts so that we can use it for running the actual function. Otherwise, it will just be hanging out here as a file. It doesn't know to actually use that as a function because it's not in our index. So what we can do here is say export GCP trigger Discord from, so it's in our Discord build hooks folder as that. And because we've exported it specifically and not as a default, we can call it out by name. And that's what these curly brackets do if you're new to TypeScript. So at that point, we should have a function ready to go, and it should create it. So let's go ahead and pop up this list, and we'll go Firebase deploy. So before I do that, let's take a look at our folder structure. You'll see this functions and source. When I go to run Firebase deploy, it should create, after linting and running TypeScript, it'll create a new folder. So you'll see this lib folder was created. It's creating all of our index files instead of TypeScript files, and then it's got a map to the TypeScript back to it. Here's our original folder for our Discord build hooks. If you ever dive into these, they're pretty cool to look at. All the little nitty-gritty things that it exports out to JavaScript is pretty sweet. So at that point, we are getting, when we ran Firebase deploy, what it's doing is packaging those up. It ran the two pre-commit or prescript commands, and it's sending our functions off to the cloud, off to Firebase. And it created both of these, Hello World and GCP build trigger in US Central 1. It's saying, hey, you want to go look at your console? Sure, let's open that and take a look. Mine is always in the wrong place. One day I'll learn to not use multiple logins. So if you can't find it, if you have a large list like mine, you can just search now down here and go directly in. So you'll see this GCP build Discord webhook. What we're going to look at are the functions. So we now have this function and this function. And if we take a look over at the pub sub side of this and look at subscriptions, we didn't have this before. And what Firebase did for us was a lot of our legwork, and set this whole subscription piece up for us, which is why it's fantastic to work with Firebase functions. So at this point, if we're to run a build, it should trigger out, and we can see that console log of the build status. What's a little meta about this is we created a function and deployed it out to look at our script, and then we're going to commit it and have it trigger. So added build function. So this is going to go up again to our GitHub repository, it's going to go to our build triggers. After you push, don't forget to push. So git push. There, it just jumped in. So you saw that trigger from GitHub. So it's actually kind of doing a webhook of its own, which is pretty sweet. If we jump back in here, we can see our build start to run. Now we have to wait for this build to finish. Again, it takes a little time, so I'm just gonna quickly fast forward the video for this part, and we'll take a look at our cloud function. Okay, we've finished up. It made it all the way through until a successful build completed. It took around 1.5 minutes to finish. If we go back, some of the cool things, and one of the requests I've had in for a long time, is to start looking at the duration of all of these. They've actually finally placed this in. This is a lot more like Azure if you're using pipelines over there, or a lot of the other features. So it's cool to see that they do finally have this build history coming out, and you can dive in and check them out. So let's go back in here. So what we're going to do is create this within this new folder in the Discord build hooks. We're going to create a function called GCP build trigger Discord. Now, what topic we have to set up is this cloud builds. It should match the same thing that is in here. So it should match this cloud builds topic in our pub sub. So we're going to send a pub sub event. You can read a little more. I'll put some notes in the lesson tutorial. But basically, that is a base64 encoded string that's coming across. We're going to use buffer to parse that to a string and then take that into a JSON payload. So if we take a look at that, all we have to do is console log it, and we'll send that up. So at this point, we're going to trigger that entire we're gonna send that up to GitHub to run our trigger. So before we do that, let's make sure we need to hook up Firebase once again. So before we trigger, let's do Firebase deploy. If I create a new one, I can just call it Alex test. We're gonna select the cloud builds pub sub topic. It's a pull. And so that should be good enough. So let's create that. So now we should have 2 out here. All right. So now let's set up. This is all finished. So now I'm actually going to trigger a new GitHub push. So I'm going to call it change name because I messed it up the first time to cloud builds. Okay, so again, if I come back into my Firebase dashboard, just refresh a little bit, you'll see our pub sub topic, GCP build trigger Discord, and our hello world. So at this point, once I push, so I'm going to click this button here, send it up to GitHub. It should have triggered in our builds. So if we open up builds history, we'll see it run. Okay, now that our build finished up, we can see it here. If we jump back over to PubSub, there should be 2 subscriptions in here. If I take a look at the Alex test subscription and view messages, here's some new messages that came across. So this is an easy way to identify what is in that message body, and you can take a look at it as it pulls that down for you. So here's the different items that are coming through for that. You can actually check out, this one is a full JSON payload, kind of identifying what we're looking for. this is the message and how it's going to be set up for us. So the body JSON keys are important when we start to look at this. It'll identify the project ID and the status. And that is what we're going to use for the remainder of these builds. So you'll see that it has the queued status, and we're going to ignore that. And also the working status, but this success status or failed status, that's what's really important to us. So as we continue to write this function, we'll have to keep that in mind. So now jumping back over to Firebase, we can check the logs over here. You can see here that the trigger happened, and you can see that the queued status is in here and the working status. If you want those, that's great. I really only care about like success and failed type of statuses. And so for ours, what we're going to do is kind of exclude those. So the next thing that we're going to do is jump back into our function over here. So now that we're kind of seeing what is happening in this build, I actually like to set up some interface type of files so my TypeScriptiness starts to come through. So I'm going to paste those in. You can take a look at these, but the top level Google Cloud build is what has our ID, our project ID, and some other options in here. And that way, once we start typing through these, we can get good TypeScript. So a lot of times what I do is just take that JSON payload, go out to a website and say, hey, convert JSON to TypeScript, and it gives me this nice setup moving forward. So at this point, we have our build message. And like I said, we want to skip some things. So what we'd like to skip are all of the statuses that don't matter to us. So for us, we'd like to skip all of these items. So if we're going to skip those, let's go ahead and console out when the status here doesn't exist and we can't find the index, go ahead and write status not found. So the next piece we're going to write is the actual Discord build post. So this is going to be a async function that we call out to our Discord build hook. So again, I'm going to copy mine over here just so I get it right the first time. So the first thing that we're going to do is say, all right, I am actually calling Discord with the body of this message. Now you need to be careful if you're using any sort of keys that might end up in your logs. Make sure to use encryption at that point. Something that we're going to skip for you guys is this Discord build hook. What this is actually identified in our function configuration. So that's another part that we can walk through as we continue to get going here. So we'll just put a to do in there for now, just so we call out to this. So what's going to happen here is we're going to actually post out to our Discord webhook. And you might be saying, well, we haven't created a webhook yet. Don't worry, we're getting there before we try to run this out in production. So the next part of this, we're going to actually build up a message that we can use to send to Discord. So if we create a new function, and I'm creating that one in the wrong spot, let's take that out of our main function there. There we go. So we're going to use this create build function, and we actually have kind of a setup that Discord uses something called embeds. And the cool part about embeds is that it puts different status messages with coloring below it. So when we start to walk through this, we will check out the different steps. So at this point, what we're going to do is set up both these calls. So the first thing that I always do when I'm setting up asynchronous calls is set up a try catch. So I always do try and catch an error, and then console.log error. So at least you know kind of what's happening if something messes up. So the first thing that we're going to do is trigger that build post. So we do an await, we're going to do send Discord build post, and then we're going to send in, because we want that body of that thing, we're going to actually send in, or not the body, I apologize, the build for it. So what we're going to do here is call our second message, create build message, and send in our build. So if you'd like to break this up, if it's a little confusing, what you can do is say, let's create our message first. So const message equals, and then we can actually do it that way. That might make more sense to people since we're first building the message and then we're actually sending the message. So as we walk down through this, we've got some squigglies. It has an any type. That's true. I'm not being very good with my TypeScriptiness at that point. Let's see what we can do about that real quick. Possibly undefined. Yeah, I agree with you. We're kind of in a bad step here. What we should be doing is actually setting up our embed. So let's take the time and be good stewards of TypeScript. So let's do. You don't actually have to export these. I think I have a bad habit of usually creating a model file. We're doing it all inline right now. So export interface. We're going to call it embed with a capital. And then let's just detail these out. So embeds is going to have a title that is a string, a description. I never, ever spell description right. And that is going to be a string and color. And that is actually a new number. It's numeric. Okay, now our embed array will probably like us a little more. So we can say embed array. So build steps. So if you're still following along, I actually started to run some negative tests and realized my code wasn't as polished as I had hoped. So there's actually a couple items in here that could be undefined. I had those set originally, so like .steps is actually a questionable thing. So if you put a question mark in there, if we weren't to check this, you'll start to see it appear. So TypeScript was trying to save me and I was ignoring it. Anyways, I've placed this if statement around this build and build.steps to make sure that a step is actually in the list before we go do for each. So if it's not, we're not going to push any of our embeds into this setup. So make sure you do Firebase deploy functions once more to update this. Let me bring this up over here. So here is Coding Cat Dev. If you ever want to jump out here, we just started moving off of Slack into Discord. So one of the things that you can do is create your own server, and then just do create a server, and we're just going to call this our GCP build Discord sample. So what's cool now is you can set up different channels. For our specific use, we're just going to set one up right in the general channel. Typically, we would probably create something that's a little more private called like build hook like this, but that's okay for now. So when you go to do this in your server, this webhook URL is, you need to keep it secret, okay? So when you go to create this webhook, we'll call it GCP build for now. This address right here is going to you have to keep that secret. So there's a couple different things that we can do in our app to make that happen. So basically, for now, what you could do to test this is, instead of to do, you could drop in this big long thing that you're not supposed to share with anyone. So instead of doing that, what Firebase provides, there's a couple different options that you can set. You can set one that's a configuration directly within your Firebase configuration, or you could use Google Cloud. Has a couple different security options that it provides. One's called, let's jump into it. One's called Secrets, or Secret Manager, and there's also an encrypted version of this. So just keep in mind, there's a couple different options when we talk about this. I'm just going to show you probably one of the most basic ones while we're doing this. So let me jump back over. The quickest way on the command line to set something like this is to create a new configuration. So let's bump this out. This gets a little long. So Firebase functions, and then you're going to do set, or let me show you first, like that it's empty. So here's Firebase functions when you get it. I always forget config git. So there's your empty one. And now we're going to do set. And it's always kind of a two-part key that you're going to end up setting. So for this one, we're going to do Discord and then dot, let's just call it build hook. And you're going to take and copy that webhook URL right into there. So when we set this, it's going to store this out once we push our function. And this becomes available for all of your functions. So just keep that in mind. And it says that right here, like you need to deploy all of your functions now. So if we run that git command again, if you ever need to figure out what you've actually stored out there, you'll get this nice JSON object that has these two items in it. So in order to get that in our function, we're going to take and go back up to this nasty string we had in here and keep that out of things. And instead of to do, what you can do is call functions.config.discord. Oh, lowercase. It is case sensitive. That has killed me in the past, by the way. So something that would probably be safer to do is do some checks on this thing, but for now, we're just going to say build. And again, it's this build hook. Let's go down here, build hook. Okay, so now we don't have in our source code going up to GitHub anything that would be secure. These don't get pushed to GitHub. They're only stored within Firebase, and you keep them a secret. So at this point, it's safe to say that we have our message that can be built to Discord. So in order to get this, once we trigger this change up to GitHub, what we can do is go, just like it said, Firebase deploy only functions. Now, one thing to keep in mind, we have that hello world one. If you ever needed to share that new configuration across functions, make sure you run the full command for all functions like this and not set one specifically like we walked through before. Okay, our deploy's complete. We are ready to receive our pub sub and send out that message to Discord. So let's go ahead and say added Discord send, and let's trigger that thing. So again, that change just went up to GitHub. GitHub triggered our build. So if we first head over to our builds again, here we can see it running. So it's going to take about 1.5 minutes again to create the npm image and then build our new React app. Okay, now that our cloud build has been pushed back to the cloud again, what you can do is take a look. We'll push this failure once more. I'm going to push that up. And now we should see our cloud build take off. And
GCP build said build 625E6565D8DC43B189C172424085119 for project GCP build Discord webhook was a failure, took 0.
Okay, so if you could hear that clear enough, because of the way we have this defined, we knew immediately that it failed, and Discord had set this text-to-speech item on a failure to true. So immediately we got that failure notification right here. So it's like, oh boy, we better do something. Now, you might like seeing kind of that red-green type of visual as well. So you could put an embed with a similar message in it just to show the failure below that in the embeds. Currently, I just have it on my steps to differentiate the two. So now if I take and fix our cloud build and place that back to just cloudbuild.yaml, but however, in this test, continue to fail out my npm install and instead call it npm alex and push that up, we should now see this failure occur after the build in the step. So this one failed right away, couldn't find a cloud build. This one's going to fail on our step for npm install. Okay, so now you see the failure at the step within our log. You see it fail here. We should get that immediate notification that it failed.
GCP build said build 483B405A97AF487B62A332551C6D90F7 for project GCP build Discord webhook was a failure, took 32.976.
So as you can see here, we actually did get our failure occurring. Now that we have a basic function where we've set up a push to Discord, we can utilize that across many different triggers for Discord and send in embedded messages. I hope you found this useful and you can use this in your projects in the future. Thanks for watching.